The house was warm, peaceful, and perfectly still, as if it were holding its breath. Soft light filled the living room, reflecting off the polished furniture and carefully arranged decor. Everything in the house spoke of routine, order, and comfort. Mary Maloney sat quietly, waiting. She was used to this moment. Every evening, she waited for her husband to return from work, counting the minutes with gentle patience. Her hands rested calmly in her lap, her face relaxed, her thoughts centered only on him. To Mary, waiting was not a burden. It was a joy. Patrick's arrival marked the beginning of her happiness for the night. When the door finally opened, Mary rose instantly, her face lighting up with a warm, loving smile. She greeted Patrick with affection, taking his coat, preparing his drink, and watching him closely. Yet something was different. His movements were stiff, his voice flat, his eyes distant. The familiar warmth between them was missing. Patrick sat down without speaking much, sipping his drink in silence. The ticking of the clock suddenly felt louder, each second echoing through the room. Mary noticed the tension but chose to ignore it. She believed love could smooth over any rough moment. Perhaps he had a bad day at work, she thought. Perhaps silence was all he needed. Mary moved gently around the room, careful not to disturb him, speaking softly whenever she did speak. Her devotion filled the space where his affection once lived. She tried to maintain the comforting rhythm of their routine, hoping it would bring him back to her. But the air remained cold and heavy. Beneath the calm surface of the evening, something dangerous was quietly forming. Something Mary could sense, but did not yet understand. The peaceful home, once a symbol of love and security, was on the edge of breaking. Patrick finished his drink in silence and set the glass down with a quiet click. The sound felt sharp in the still room. He did not look at Mary when he spoke. His voice was calm, controlled, too calm. It carried no anger, no hesitation, only certainty. He told her he was leaving. For a moment, the words made no sense. They floated in the air, distant and unreal, as if spoken in another language. Mary stood frozen, staring at her husband's face, searching for a sign that this was a joke, a mistake, something he would soon take back. But Patrick's expression remained cold and final. Her mind began to slow, refusing to accept what her ears had heard. She thought of their home, their shared routines, the quiet evenings just like this one. She tried to speak logically, carefully choosing her words, reminding him of the life they had built together. She did not beg. She did not cry. Not yet. Patrick interrupted her gently, but firmly. He explained that it was better this way. He said he would take care of things, that she wouldn't be left helpless, but his words only deepened the wound. There was a selfishness in his kindness, a finality that crushed any hope she had. Mary nodded slowly, as if she understood, though her heart was breaking. Inside her, something fragile began to crack. The love she had held so tightly suddenly felt meaningless, invisible. Still in shock, Mary turned and walked toward the kitchen. Her movements were automatic, controlled by habit rather than thought. She told herself she would cook dinner, just as she always did. Normal actions felt safer than reality. Behind her, Patrick stood waiting, unaware that his words had already set something irreversible into motion. Mary stood in the kitchen, her hands resting against the cold surface of the freezer. Her mind was still numb, drifting somewhere between disbelief and routine. Patrick's words echoed faintly in her head, but they felt distant, as though they belonged to someone else's life. She opened the freezer door and reached inside without thinking. Her fingers wrapped around a frozen leg of lamb, hard, heavy, and icy to the touch. She closed the door and turned around, still lost in her thoughts, still trying to hold on to normalcy. Patrick was standing with his back toward her. He spoke again, casually, almost impatiently, as if the matter were already settled. There was no emotion in his voice, no concern for what his decision had done to her. His indifference cut deeper than anger ever could. In that instant, something inside Mary snapped. There was no scream, no warning, no conscious decision. Her body moved before her mind could stop it. She lifted the frozen lamb and struck him once, with all the force her shock and despair could summon. The sound was dull and final. Patrick fell forward and collapsed onto the floor without a word. His glass shattered beside him, the drink spreading slowly across the carpet. The silence that followed was overwhelming. Mary stood still, staring at his motionless body. The lamb slipped from her hand and hit the floor. For several seconds, she could not breathe. Then realization crept in, cold, sharp, undeniable. He was dead. A wave of panic rushed through her, but it did not last long. Slowly, remarkably, her fear gave way to clarity. Tears never came. Instead, her mind began to work with frightening precision. This was no longer an accident she could undo. This was a moment that had changed everything, and there was no turning back. Mary took a deep breath and looked down at Patrick's body one last time. Panic threatened to return, but she pushed it aside. Crying would not help her now. Screaming would only destroy her. She needed to think, and surprisingly, thinking came easily. She picked up the frozen leg of lamb from the floor. Its cold weight reminded her of what she had done, yet she did not hesitate. She placed it in the oven, setting it to cook, as if preparing an ordinary dinner. The weapon would disappear, not in fire, but in time. Moving calmly through the house, Mary wiped her hands and straightened her dress. She practiced her expression in the mirror, confused, loving, unaware. Every detail mattered. She told herself the story again and again until it felt real. Then she picked up her coat and went out into the night. At the grocery store, Mary smiled politely and spoke cheerfully, asking for vegetables and a cheesecake. She joked about her husband's dinner, about how hungry he would be when he came home. Her voice was steady. The shopkeeper saw nothing unusual. To him, she was just another devoted wife. When Mary returned home, she paused at the door. She took one last breath and let the shock return to her face. She stepped inside, saw Patrick's body again, and this time, she screamed. The police arrived quickly. Mary wept openly, her words broken and confused. She told them she had gone shopping and returned to find her husband dead. Her grief was so convincing that no one doubted her. As the officers began their search, Mary sat quietly, listening, knowing that the most dangerous evidence was already disappearing, slowly roasting in the oven. The house slowly filled with police officers, their heavy footsteps echoing through rooms that once felt warm and safe. They spoke in low voices, moving carefully, professionally. To them, this was a crime scene. To Mary, it was the place where her entire life had collapsed. Patrick's colleagues treated her gently. They offered kind words, brought her a chair, and encouraged her to rest. No one suspected her. She looked exactly as they expected a grieving wife to look, pale, shaken, broken by loss. The officers began their search immediately. They believed the murder weapon had to be something solid, perhaps a metal object or a heavy tool. They searched drawers, cabinets, and cupboards, lifting cushions and examining corners. Each time they failed to find anything, their confusion grew. Mary sat quietly, hands folded in her lap, listening to every word. Her heart pounded, but her face remained calm. She knew the truth. She could almost hear it sizzling softly in the oven behind them. One officer suggested the weapon might still be inside the house. Another believed it had been taken away. They argued politely, unaware that the answer was closer than either of them imagined. Seeing their exhaustion, Mary stood up slowly and spoke in a soft, caring voice. She offered them food. It was the least she could do, she said, after all they had done for her husband. Hungry and tired, the officers accepted. They gathered in the kitchen and ate the roasted lamb, praising its tenderness. As they talked, one of them laughed and joked that the murder weapon was probably right under their noses. Mary listened from the doorway, her lips tightening into the faintest smile. With every bite they took, the evidence disappeared completely, along with any chance of the truth ever being discovered. The kitchen slowly returned to calm. Plates were emptied, cups set aside, and the conversation among the officers softened as their search came to an end. They had eaten well, rested a little, and reached no conclusions. One by one, they prepared to leave, offering Mary gentle reassurances before stepping into the night. Mary thanked them quietly. Her voice was steady now, almost peaceful. When the door finally closed behind the last officer, the house fell silent once again. The same silence that had filled it earlier that evening, but this time, everything had changed. The danger had passed. The questions were gone. Mary walked slowly back into the living room and sat down. Her body felt heavy, yet her mind was strangely light. She replayed the events of the night, not with fear, but with a distant sense of disbelief. It all felt unreal, as though she had been watching someone else's life unfold. From the kitchen, she could still hear faint laughter echoing in her memory, the officers joking, unaware, satisfied. The thought struck her suddenly, and without warning, a soft laugh escaped her lips. It was quiet, almost soundless. Not a laugh of joy, but one of dark understanding. The truth had been consumed. The evidence destroyed. The crime erased. Mary covered her mouth, still smiling faintly, as the meaning of it all settled in. The weapon they had searched for so desperately had been right there, served politely, eaten gratefully, and praised for its taste. She sat alone in the quiet house, untouched by suspicion, wrapped in the safety of appearances. The world would never know what had truly happened inside these walls. And in that silence, Mary Maloney remained free, her secret sealed forever, hidden beneath the most ordinary act of all.